Kids mostly behave themselves. So at midnight tonight, there will be 408 hours to the end of the year, 15 days to the end of the decade. I don't know what your decade was like, but maybe you got married or divorced. Maybe you went into rehab, got out of rehab, went back into rehab. Maybe you were pregnant, had a miscarriage. Maybe your home got foreclosed on, your car got repoed. Maybe you were in and out of debt, and you went back into debt. My decade in review, I had a job, I lost a job. Shortly after I lost the job, I became a Christian. But before I became a Christian, I had a situation in my life so difficult that I contacted the Dr. Phil show, and the producer decided it was good enough for TV and contacted me back. I was not on the Dr. Phil show because it takes a while for that process to happen. It took about 3 months. They called me 3 months later. At that point in time, I was a Christian. I was in and out of the hospital twice. The first time was for carbon monoxide poisoning. The doctor walked in with the most serious, confused, and why was I here look on his face. He told me if I went back into that garage, everything was dead except me. I was the only thing that was able to crawl out of there alive. I always envisioned in my head that my guardian angel was scooping air from outside and throwing it in my face and kicking me to wake me back up. The second time I went to the hospital, I was in there for a week. Took 3 months for semi-healthy recovery. Took a year to get fully back to normal. 2 years after that, I got married. 4 years into our marriage, we had our first child. He's 6 months old. Suicide rates in this country are at a 30-year high. 22 veterans a day commit suicide. I've studied a lot, and I've wondered why that happens. Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when desire comes, it is the tree of life." Whenever we don't have hope, we fall into depression. We either seek Dr. Phil for our hope, we'll seek drugs, seek alcohol. Any addiction that you can think of stems from no hope, or maybe you just think it's fun. I found that hope within Jesus Christ. John 3:16 through 17 says, "For God so loved the world, for he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him." One thing that I found through all these different experiences is that people are always going to be people, whether they're in the church or out of the church. I never looked for these individuals for hope. They do make me hopeful, but whenever they fall, whenever I notice somebody get a divorce, whenever I see them in pain, I understand they're just human. They're soft and squishy just like me. The book God's Amazing Grace, page 184, paragraph 4, says all trials that are received as educators will produce joy. For the trials that we go through, we have to receive them as educators for them to produce joy. If we do not receive them as an educator, they produce hopelessness. And you can only find that hope through Jesus. Some of the trials I've been through, I've received a lot of joy from them because a lot of it was my own fault. Most of them, it was my own fault. And Philippians 4:13 says, "For I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me." I can get out of debt. I can save my marriage. In some extreme instances, divorce is necessary. In most instances, it can be resolved. For if we do not focus on the problem, we can't resolve it. A lot of times in relationships, in debt, in these different areas of life, we just ignore them. And we do not cultivate them like we should. To have a healthier marriage, you have to focus on your wife. And it starts with the little things. The little things will grow into the bigger things, and then all of a sudden, you just end up as roommates in the same house, sometimes sleeping in separate beds. And if you want to get that marriage back, you're going to have to date your wife again, and it's going to feel weird because you haven't done it in a while. It's going to be uncomfortable because you don't know her anymore. The only reason you knew her while you were dating was because you were focused on her. I'm going to close with a quote from Dr. Phil and a Bible verse. The past is the past, the future hasn't come yet. All that there is today. And the question is, what are you going to do? Joshua 24:15 says, "And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose to this day who you will serve. But for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I think there's a closing song. Yes, okay.